fascinators, more like the UNfascinators, am I right? Hey everyone, it's Olivia and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be talking about The Fascinators by Andrew Eliopoulos. I hope that I'm pronouncing that correct, but mispronouncing author names is just an occupational hazard at this point, so forgive me. The Fascinators is a queer contemporary fantasy novel that takes place in a world where magic is a part of all of us. Everyone has magic, but not everyone practices magic. Magic is another thing that people can be discriminated against, and in some religions such as Christianity, it's seen as a sin and the work of the devil. This book follows Sam and his two best friends, James and Delia, in their senior year of high school in a small town in Georgia. They are part of a magic club, and magic club is something that schools typically have, but at their school they're the only 3 members of the magic club, and they have renamed themselves the Fascinators, hence the title of the book. They practice all year for this magical convention that takes place where all of the magic clubs in the area come together to show their magical skills. However, the bond between the 3 best friends starts to fall apart. Sam is pining after James, Delia is growing tired of their amateur magic club, and James gets involved with a sketchy magic group, putting them all in danger. So this section is going to be without spoilers. So based off of that premise, I was really intrigued by this book. I was really excited to read it. It seemed like it was going to be something really, really good. I thought that this book had a lot of potential, but it ended up being really disappointing. I felt like there were a lot of aspects that were really interesting and strong within the novel, but were not explored enough, and I think it was poorly executed. So generally, I thought this was a pretty okay book. I'm gonna talk about the things that I did like, and then I'll talk about the things that I didn't like. So the things that I did like, I really loved the concept of this novel. I like modern fantasy. I like the idea of having magic in the world as just something that is a part of all of us and is universally accepted as existing. I love that idea. So I like how magic is just seen as something that anyone can do, but magic is a skill that takes a lot of practice to master, and I really like that idea. So similar to music or art, magic is like a subject you can study in school. I like the concept that some people would choose not to practice magic if magic really existed, because lots of people would definitely think that it is the work of the devil. Side note, this actually gave me an idea for like a novel where there is a magic club, but everyone assumes that the magic is just like magic tricks that you see that magicians do in our world, and the magic club is actually like real magic, and they've been like saving the school over and over and over again, and nobody actually knows. But then there's like this huge threat where they have to like expose themselves and reveal that they can actually do magic, and then probably at the end everybody just thinks that it's some big elaborate illusion or something, but I don't know. The second thing that I liked about this was the queer representation. LGBTQ plus books, we need more of them. So the main character, Sam, is gay, and he's in love with his best friend James, but he doesn't know if James feels the same way. And before the book takes place, there is an incident that keeps getting referenced from Sam's point of view, is the bowling alley incident. Basically, something happened over the summer at this bowling alley, and you don't really know what it is until it's revealed at the very end. But throughout the entire book, it's slowly being teased out as this really important moment between the two of them, and Sam's just really, really confused. James isn't talking to him about it. They're not addressing it, and so it's one of the biggest plot points that exist within the book, in combination with the idea that Sam's not just gay, he's also a magicker, which are 2 things he's discriminated against for. Was just kind of an interesting dynamic to explore within the book as well. The cover of this book is amazing. I love it. It's so beautiful, and it's so sad that the insides are not as beautiful as the outsides. It's just so intriguing. I love this cover. It's beautiful. And the last thing I want to mention about the things that I liked is that I actually liked how magic wasn't like the major big focus of the novel. It was more focused on the relationships between the friends and their dynamic and how it's shifting and changing. The story focuses on the idea of growing up and growing apart, and I really, really liked that. And especially because in the world, magic is just something that is a part of it. It felt like as a reader, where because the magic wasn't the main focus, we also were experiencing it the same way that the characters would in a world where magic is normal. Okay, so those are all the things that I liked about this novel. So here are the things that I didn't like about this novel. I mentioned that I liked the concept of the magic in this world, but I felt like the magic system was too confusing. Even though it's not the focus of the novel, they do use magic and practice it, and the way that it's described doesn't really make sense to me. And so I felt like that was a problem while I was reading, was because I was really confused about how these things worked. I ended up having more questions than answers, and I felt like the way that it was written could have been maybe more simplified so that the magic system wasn't as complex and you wouldn't have as many questions, so then you wouldn't be focusing too much on the magic. But to me, it was really confusing. There didn't really seem to be any boundaries to what they could do. Like in this world, you can like Google spells that people have created, and I was just like, how do you create spells? And then why would you trust people on the internet? In the world, some people had like affinities for certain types of magic. One of the characters, Denver, has this affinity for luck magic, and I'm pretty sure Sam's mom had an affinity for like empathy magic, and I wasn't really sure what exactly that entailed. Are they inherently better at that type of magic but still like have to practice it, or is that just something that they can do without really thinking about it? I didn't really understand what that meant. They also mentioned that they had to have certain associations when they're doing a spell. I wasn't really sure what that meant either, and there were certain objects that have been like enchanted or spelled to aid them with their magic, and I wasn't really sure how that worked either, so I was just really confused about how the magic system worked. I also didn't like how flat the characters were. To me, they didn't really have much development, and they kind of stayed the same throughout. Sam is the one that we get to know the most because he's the main character and we see mostly from his point of view. So we only see the other characters through Sam's perspective, and we see especially James and Delia from his perspective. We don't actually get to know much about them through his perspective either. That felt like a huge disconnect because they're supposed to be best friends, and the way that like Sam describes them and observes them doesn't feel as close as it should be. I felt like I didn't know James and Delia, and because of this, I felt like Sam didn't know James and Delia because it's from his perspective. They're supposed to be best friends, and yes, the plot is about like how their friendship is falling apart, but to me, it felt like from the very start that their friendship just wasn't as strong as what I imagined three best friends would be like. Also, adding to that, I didn't like how the characters didn't really have any growth. Sam is pretty much the same throughout, as well as James, and Delia sort of has her own arc, but that was poorly executed in my opinion. It seemed to come out of nowhere for her character. Another thing that I didn't like about this book was the perspective changes in it. For the most part, we follow Sam and it's from his perspective for most of the book. We get shifts in POV. We see from Delia's perspective a few times and this other character, Liv. We never see James, which I feel like we should have gotten some of him if we were getting some of Delia as well. The perspective changes actually reminded me of Infinity Sun by Adam Silvera, because in that book there were also many perspective changes to these minor characters that I felt like didn't need to be there, or there could have been more of. I feel like for this book especially, I think I would have preferred it if it switched between Sam, James, and Delia, because the book is about them and how their friendship is falling apart, and it would have been more interesting to see all of their perspectives. We see a bit of Delia, we never see James, and I feel like it would have been so much better if we got a glimpse into what was going on in James' head, because like I said, most of it is from Sam's perspective, so we don't really get to know James and Delia as well as we could have, and if we included their perspectives, I feel like the story would have been stronger. The other thing that I didn't like about this book was the pacing. For the most part, the book is kind of just like a pretty slow pacing, and sometimes like the pacing really picks up, and especially at the ending, everything seemed so rushed, like the author kind of ran out of space and just had to like write the ending super quickly. I felt like everything was really chaotic in the end, and like there wasn't even much resolution. I legitimately thought that some of the pages of the book were missing. It seemed to me that there were huge chunks of information that were just missing, especially at the end. I was left with so many questions. The whole bowling alley incident is revealed in the end, but James and Sam actually don't have that conversation that has been teased at throughout the entire book. The entire book, you're kind of sitting there, you're like, oh my god, they need to talk about this, and then at the end they kind of just mention it and then move on, and I'm just like, what? And I still don't know where their relationship stands. Like, I still don't. I was really hoping that this would be the first book in a series, but it's actually supposed to be a standalone. The author isn't intending to write more, and I felt like the world could have been expanded so much more. A lot of the characters kind of are left in this place where you don't know what really happened to them, and I would really like to know what happened to them. The last thing I want to mention is that I felt like the plot could have been tighter. The way that everything came together at the end was kind of sloppy to me. It felt like it was all over the place. It needed to focus more on one thing rather than all of these things at once. I feel like all of the layers didn't come together very well at the end. This book has friendship troubles, love problems, evil magicers, and the magical convention, but they all seem to be kind of their own plot lines throughout the book, and they didn't connect together as seamlessly as I had hoped. And in the spoiler section, I will discuss more about how I think that this book should have been written. Okay, so here's the spoiler section. If you haven't read the book or you don't want to be spoiled, then click away, go and watch one of my other videos. And if you want to hear more of my specific thoughts about this book, then stick around. So I want to start off by talking about the characters. Like I said, Sam is the main character. He was also the best character in the book. Since most of the characters just aren't good characters, it's not really saying much for him in comparison to other characters in other books. He was a really flat character. He didn't have much development throughout the book, but he was pretty consistent. He was like the only sane character in the book, other than Denver, I suppose, but Denver is not like one of the more main characters. He's kind of just like there to exist, and I'll talk about that later. Sam was the only one who was trying to keep their friend group together, and I would go as far as to say that he was the glue of the group. I felt like his connection with Delia was strong, his connection with James was strong. I don't think Delia and James really had the same kind of connection, so to me, I felt like Sam was the one who was keeping the group together. He was the glue, and since James and Delia are kind of off doing their own thing, Sam's kind of just left alone and is the only one who actually cares that their group is falling apart. He was also like the only character who seemed to care about the magical cult and that they could very well die from this. James is the catalyst for them being the target of this magical cult, and Delia like kind of just doesn't care, and I felt like Sam was the only one who was like a realistic character who saw this as like a threat and actually wanted to do something about it and was like concerned, and the others just kind of were like whatever about it. Okay, so I want to talk about James. So James was the reason why they got into this mess in the first place. So he stole a powerful spell book from True Light, which is the evil cult that I've been mentioning, and then he magicked it away to a place that he didn't even know where, which I still don't really understand how that happened. He ropes his friends into trying to find it. In the process, he caused Sam to also be cursed like he was, to have like nightmares, I believe, and James didn't even seem to be remorseful about it. Like, he didn't even seem to be sorry that he was causing so much trouble for his friends. He's just not a good friend. So we get to know through Sam's perspective that James is having a difficult life at home with his dad and having to take care of his little brother, but we don't really get to know him. So to me, James kind of comes off as really selfish and a reckless character who doesn't think about the consequences of his actions. You learn in the book that he's pretty much just likes to get drunk and then makes really bad decisions. That's how he ended up stealing the spellbook in the first place. So he just seems like a character who has like no self-control. We find out later that the bowling alley incident was someone calling him and Sam derogatory terms for being gay, and in order to make them shut up, he just like kisses Sam out of the blue, and then they never talk about it. I'm gonna read the passage from the book because I feel like it's really important for you to hear. James's response, hardly missing a beat, was to lean over and kiss Sam, full on the mouth. It was a horrible moment that should have been wonderful. A kiss that felt more performative than genuine. That came as a shock when Sam was already shocked. That lasted both too long and not long enough. That only served its purpose if its purpose was to send Bethany away. And why would that ever be the purpose of a kiss? There are like a million other ways to make a homophobic bully shut up and go away. And like kissing your same-sex best friend is definitely not on the top of the list. I don't know why that was his initial thought, was to just like be like, you know what, I'm gonna kiss you right now. First off, just assaulting your friend, not okay. Even the description in the book, which is why I wanted to read it to you, describes it as a horrible thing. And I'm just like, it is a horrible thing. You should not do that to someone. And like, especially because we know that Sam's been harboring a crush on James, even though James doesn't know that, it's like, even worse because he wanted the kiss to be real. He wanted it to be important. Like, this moment should have meant a lot to him, but instead it was just this performance in front of these people just like to get rid of them. And that also doesn't change the fact that James just assaulted him. No consent, just like kissed him. What's with these contemporary novels with people assaulting people with kisses? Like, please stop. That's not okay. James almost dies at the end of the book and I just didn't feel anything for him. I was just like, okay. Honestly, if he had died, I really wouldn't care that much. Like, even his sacrifice in the end didn't even feel as important or dramatic as it should have been. Let's talk about Delia. Oh my god, Delia was so annoying to me. She's supposed to be like the nerdy, really smart character of the group, kind of like the Hermione character. She was the only like main female character of the book. I was really hoping she would be a badass, but really she was just she was terrible. She just came off as selfish and petty to me. Throughout the book, Delia is just overall a bad friend. So we mostly see her through Sam's perspective, but we do see from her perspective, which I thought was strange that we didn't get James' perspective, but like whatever. From the glimpses that we get from Delia's perspective, Delia seems really resentful towards James and Sam, especially because they kind of went to all these parties without her and hung out without her. She feels left out and she's really bitter about it. But the thing is, like, they knew that Delia wouldn't want to go to these parties anyway, but I guess it's the thought of being invited that counts. So she's kind of bitter about that, which is valid. But the way that her feelings kind of just manifest throughout the book, you just think, well, if you just talked about how hurt you felt, then you wouldn't have this problem. The amount of lack of communication in this book frustrates me so much, because if they had just talked about things, I guess there wouldn't be a book then. But what I really didn't like about her character is that she feels like James and Sam are holding her back. She thinks their magic club is amateur. She is like the best magicer out of all of them, and she wants to go to this magic school called Pinnacle, and she really needs to up her game if she wants to get in. So like at convention, she wants to have like really impressive magic to show, but there's only like 3 of them, so they can't cover all the categories like she wants. So she feels like she has to carry the weight of the entire club and can't advance her magic because she has to help Sam and James with their magic. So these 2 aspects of her character, her being bitter about being left out and their club being too amateur for her, are the reasons why she decides to join True Light, that evil magic cult that I mentioned, and it seems to come out of nowhere. So here's a little paragraph that tries to explain her reasoning from her perspective, and I just think it's the most ridiculous thing for her character. If Sam and James couldn't see how much it had hurt her to be consistently forgotten, what did she owe them anyway in the face of this new opportunity? This new group, who hadn't ended up with Delia by an accident of geography, but had picked her quite intentionally because of what she could do. So first off, she's just really bitter about the fact that her friends don't notice that she feels left out, even though she never said anything. And then because these True Light people noticed her and saw potential in her, she feels compelled to join them, even though she knows that they're evil. She feels like because they're the only magicers at that school, that's the reason why they became friends in the first place. And I'm really confused because they're supposed to be best friends outside of all the magic stuff, right? And it's just like, I never really get to see that. Delia is supposed to be the smart character, and she does one of the stupidest things that you could even do in this book. She joins the people who are doing dangerous magic and basically went after her friends, and she's just like, I'm gonna join them because they see potential in me. I'm just like, ugh. Here Sam is chasing after you, worried about you, and wondering why the hell you're lying to him and like pulling away from their friend group when really he's like so concerned about you. True Light doesn't freaking care about you. They don't. They just want to use you as another magicer to do their evil bidding. Like, they find out that True Light wants to open a door to the spirit world, and they're all like, oh my god, that's so bad, and like take magic from other people in order to do it. And like, this is literally Delia. She's like, these people chose me. That makes me special, and they can help me get into Pinnacle. And we're just like, girl, do you honestly think that they're gonna have you join their evil cult and then let you go to a magical university? Like, they're not gonna let go of you, girl. Like, that's not how evil cults work. Do you not understand that? Like, she's supposed to be smart, but she just was like the stupidest character. So since the book mostly follows Sam, Delia's actions and like the reveal of what she's done fell really flat. Delia lies about where she is, and Sam, being the concerned friend, finds out that she lied and confronts her about it. And then Delia gets really mad at him for spying on her, despite the fact that she was the one who lied in the first place and like was putting them at risk of danger. Like, okay, fine, like get mad that your friend's spying on you because he's concerned. She had like no right to be upset in that moment. Sam should have been more angry with her, honestly. I'm just like, Sam, you're like too calm in this situation. Like, you're hurt and you're just like, you know what, Delia, you do you, girl. She had a friend that was so concerned about her, and she literally would rather be with the people who just want to use her. And I was like, she did not weigh out all the pros and cons of that situation, and she should have. Her development was so poorly executed. I feel like if her character was supposed to be the one who took a turn to the dark side, it should have been more elaborated on. Like, we should have seen more of her thought process throughout the book and more of her reasoning and like how True Light had convinced her that this is where she should be. And then Delia being the reason why True Light attacks everyone at the convention and like inadvertently like almost kills James is like the most ridiculous thing to me, because like literally the book kind of like writes it as like, looking back she would regret this decision. Basically True Light was like, we need to find a place that has like a bunch of magickers so we can take their magic. She's just sitting there and she's like, the convention. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, girl, not only are your friends gonna be at the convention, but there are gonna be a bunch of innocent people there who have done nothing wrong, and you're just gonna offer them as like sacrifice for your weird magic cult? Like, how is that even logical? She was like, I was being listened to, I was being heard, like I wanted people to know that I had good ideas and that I'm useful. But the consequences of that, like, did you not even think? Like, oh my god. Her character arc just didn't make any sense to me, and she seemed like so selfish because she didn't even care about what happened to her friends, and literally just like showed up at convention where she knew her friends were gonna be and like almost killed James. Girl, no. Let's talk about Denver. So Denver is the new kid at their school and he joins their little club. Denver is a shameless flirt and I love him for it, and that's great, but I don't love his role in the book. He doesn't really have a purpose other than to serve as a love interest for Sam, and like even that role isn't as important because Sam's in love with James. You would think if James was interested as well, he'd be jealous about Sam and Denver's relationship, but like we don't even get to see that either. So like him being there didn't really have much of a purpose. Denver could have been taken out of the book completely and the story wouldn't have changed at all. That's how unimportant he was to the book. Although I do love him because he is a pretty fun character. Like, I liked reading little tidbits about him, but he doesn't really have much development or his own arc or anything. He's just kind of there, and I felt like it was really unnecessary to even have him in there at all. Throughout the book, Denver is like constantly flirting with Sam, and his character is there to show that there is a super cute interested boy right in front of Sam, but Sam still hung up on James. Like, that was his purpose. But like in the end, Sam and Denver end up together, and I'm just like, I mean, I guess I saw that coming, but like low-key I was kind of like over here like shipping Sam and James, because who just like kisses their best friend if they're not at least a little bit interested? Like, come on. When Sam and Denver end up together, we don't even really know how that develops, because throughout the book they're just kind of like flirting with each other. There's no real conversation that is like, I like you, like let's be in a relationship, like I want to date you, or any of that. Like, we don't ever see that happen. Like, they're just on a date at the end and you're like, oh, okay. And it was just like a way to wrap up the ending of the book for like something happy, but it felt really off to me. Like, not necessarily forced because you kind of expect them to end up together, but it just felt like there was a huge time jump. Like I mentioned before, like I thought there were pages missing, and I just feel like there could have been a better way of kind of showing that without doing like this huge jump, mostly because there wasn't much development between them and like for their relationship or for Denver as his own character. I felt like it was just really strange to kind of end it there. Sure, they had their like flirting, but it never really seemed to go any further than something playful, so I wasn't really sure like how this like ended up being like a serious relationship. Okay, Liv. So this book opens up with a prologue from Liv's perspective. So she's trying to get out of Georgia, but she ends up running into this member of True Light who ends up recruiting her, and she joins their cult. So like for a character who introduces us to the book and the world of the book, she actually doesn't play that important of a role. I thought we were gonna see more of her. I thought we were gonna see a lot of her actually, because it starts with her perspective, but then it kind of just shifts into mostly about Sam. So we don't see her for a good portion of the book. We get little glimpses every now and then just so that we can kind of see the inner workings of True Light. It felt kind of off to me, and it felt kind of like jarring to switch between like Sam's perspective and Liv's that perspective into True Light. It didn't really feel natural. Like, it didn't flow very well to me. So Liv manages to escape True Light, and Sam finds her at this, I think it's a therapy group or peer support group. And so she kind of helps him figure out what True Light is actually planning. Like, he asks her to help them, but she refuses because she doesn't want to get involved with True Light anymore. And I feel like it would have been much more interesting to just take a look through Delia's perspective in terms of how True Light functions, because Delia does end up joining them, and I would have liked to see that moment when she decides to join them and like her kind of figuring out, oh, this is what their plan is, would have been more interesting than Liv just kind of being there. So like Liv also felt like Denver, where she didn't feel really important to the book and could have been written out completely. Although I do think that Liv would have been a really, really interesting character if we saw more of her perspective rather than just following Sam throughout the book. We would have seen her like believing in True Light at the beginning and then slowly realizing that, oh my god, these people are fucking crazy, and then deciding to escape. And I would have really liked to see that part of her journey instead of little glimpses, and then running away where she encounters Sam. And I would have liked to see Liv and Sam team up together to fight True Light. I think that would have been a lot more interesting than how it was in the book. So I want to talk about the ending. Basically the big part of the book that I really, really didn't like. Basically, this is how the ending of the book goes. Delia joins True Light. Sam, James, and Denver go to the convention and complete in all of these magical categories like illusions of grandeur and elements of empathy. And I don't know what these categories are. They're not really explained. I would have liked to know more about the convention because honestly, that was the point in the book that I was really interested in. So the whole point of the convention in the book is basically for all of them to end up in the same place. So True Light shows up at the post-convention dance because this wouldn't be a YA contemporary novel in high school if there wasn't a dance. And they start doing their spell. And then James somehow tries to stop them and ends up like magically exploding in a way. Like his magic kind of explodes out of him because his magic is, I don't even know, like we don't really understand his magic. Like the characters don't even understand his magic, but like it's powerful or whatever. But like he's still alive. So James ends up in the hospital. And then Sam saves him by like sharing his magic with him because people can't live without magic. Everybody has magic in them, and like it's proven that you can't like live without your magic. It's not really explained that this is what Sam does. Like I just assume like he's sharing his magic, or like I thought he was actually like sacrificing himself and giving James his magic. I thought it was gonna be an exchange, but like they're both alive in the end. I don't really understand that part. So James wakes up, and when you think that Sam and James are finally gonna talk about the bowling alley incident, they just acknowledge that they both remember that night, and then they change the subject and move on. And I'm just like, the entire book we were just waiting for them to talk about this, and then they're just like, do you remember that night at the bowling alley? And then he's like, yeah, I do. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, you didn't even talk about it. Like, we don't even actually know if they continue to stay friends or if James ever returned his feelings. We don't know. Delia regrets her decision to join True Light after the incident at the convention. She realizes, oh my god, these people are crazy. Even though we knew that the entire time. So she decides to run away. Basically, her character is like Liv, where she joins because she believes that she's gonna be important, and then she realizes that they're crazy and evil and decides to run away, and like somehow she survives this. And then Sam and Denver end up together, and that's like the ending of the book. We don't get any real resolution for the bowling alley incident. I was really hoping for like a heart-to-heart moment there. It was really disappointing and unsatisfying because it's been mentioned throughout the book and you don't get any answers. We also don't get any resolution for Delia either. We just know that she runs away and she wants to run as far away from Georgia, as far away from True Light, far away from Pinnacle as well. And I'm just like, I don't understand what's happening, and we don't really know what happens to her. She kind of just like disappears. And it's so weird because like Sam's just like not even concerned. Like even though he knows that Delia joined True Light of her own volition and like was part of the people who attacked the convention, I feel like if I was Sam, you know, and she was supposed to be my best friend, I would still be really concerned about her, and I would actually try to like find her and convince her to come back. But like whatever, we don't even get like Sam mourning over the loss of his best friend. It's she just came off as a really dumb character, and her like epiphany at the end of the book where it's like, oh, these people are crazy and evil. This is the quote from the book. Delia had confirmed her own long-standing suspicion that these True Light members were all absolutely insane, and she couldn't respect herself if she stayed with them, no matter how powerful they were. Long-standing suspicion. Girl, we already been knew. Like, we knew they were insane, and you're over here thinking like this was your own suspicion? No, literally, Sam was like, dude, you're getting involved with the really sketchy people here. And she's over here like, you don't care about me, like you are dragging me down, I'm gonna go join them. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. And then the way that it's explained is that she wouldn't be able to respect herself if she stayed with them. Not because they're evil, but because her reputation. Like she couldn't respect herself if she stayed with these insane people. I'm just like, girl, you shouldn't respect yourself at all for joining them. Like, and then she just manages to like get away from them. I don't think so. I feel like, you know, True Light should hunt down their ex-members and kill them because they know too much, like, honestly. But we don't really know what happens to her in the end. I want to talk about the final lines of the book. So throughout the book, we get these little hints about Sam not being able to dream or not being able to remember his dreams. And one of the last lines of the book is this: he remembered his dreams now. He was living them. Oh my god, I cringed so hard when I read this. I like screamed and like just threw my Kindle to the side and was just like, no. Like, why? It feels so cheesy and out of place, especially because this wasn't about Sam living his dreams, right? Like, this was about him and his friends and like how people grow up and they grow apart. And then the very last line of the book: books are high-level group spells. I don't even know what to do with this line. It sounds like it should be significant, but like to me, it like doesn't make any sense. It feels really out of place for the novel. So like throughout the book, we kind of learn that the more magic, the merrier, or something like that. I think they called it Merlin's Law, by the way. We know that group magic is stronger than individual magic, but that was hardly the main theme of the book, especially because their friend group fell apart. Obviously, that wasn't strong enough. And I was thinking it could be referring to like how books are kind of a magic of its own, how it takes everyone who's reading the book to give the book its power that is similar to like how magic works. But that also has nothing to do with the actual events of the book either. So it doesn't really make any sense to end it this way. I felt like the author was trying to end it in like this significant kind of meaningful way, a way to like connect with the audience and their readers, but like it felt really out of place to me, and like I really don't know what to do with that line. Like, I don't understand it. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe I'm Delia in this situation. I was just left with a lot of confusion, and I had so many questions, and I really wished like it could have been resolved in the end, but it wasn't. I forgot to mention that one of the things that really confused me was that I never really understood what True Light was trying to do. Like, we knew they wanted to like open a door to the spirit world for whatever reason, and they were like taking magic from other people. Like, there's this one moment where like one of the characters is like, it worked, and like he's like floating above the ground. I'm just like, I don't really understand what's happening right now. Like, did you get possessed by a ghost or something and so now you're floating? Like, does taking someone else's magic like allow you to fly? Like, I don't really understand how significant that was, because it didn't end up playing a big role in the book at all. I don't know what True Light was trying to do. We just know that we had to stop them. Now we are at my favorite part of this review, where I basically just read a fix-it-fic. This is how it should have been written so that it could have been better. So like, I feel like the book should have focused more on the magical convention. I think it would have been more interesting, and I think it would have been a better way to introduce the magic of the world and how it worked by having these characters practice for the magical convention and like doing all these spells and things. In the book, the convention didn't seem to be the most important aspect, despite it being the most interesting part to me. So the book should have been about them practicing their magic and like us kind of seeing their dynamic as magicers and a group of friends who are involved with this. And then it would have been interesting with the addition of Denver to see how their dynamic definitely changes. Delia could have been seen getting really frustrated with everyone else's less advanced magic, and James could have been seen struggling with his magic because he's not sleeping due to the curse that was placed upon him because he stole the book and the evil magicers cursed him. And then they could have like eventually found out about what James had done. That introduces True Light to the book. Like, True Light tries to come after him and ends up getting his friends in danger as well, and then that's kind of how they get roped into this whole situation. Then all of them could have looked for the book that James stole. Delia could have actually encountered one of the members of True Light during this, who maybe like uses a spell to show her true desire that she wants to be a better magicker, and like entices her to join them. And like at first she's like, no, but then they find the book, she sees the advanced spells in it, and she kind of feels compelled to join them. And basically they're just like, we'll teach you how to do these spells in this book if you join us. So she's conflicted about it, but then something happens with Sam and James. Like, she is like really upset about how they keep leaving her out of stuff, so like that is what sparks her to join True Light. Meanwhile, James and Sam finally actually like sit down and talk about their problems. They talk about the kiss because they're not in danger of being killed by True Light after they find the book, so they come to an understanding. Sam can finally move on from James, and he starts to respond to Denver's advancements towards him, and like their relationship can actually develop, and we can actually see that. So then Delia continues to be suspicious, and then Sam and James confront her about it. So So Delia can continue to like pull away from them in anger, and then like Sam, James, and Denver kind of band together to try and save their friend from True Light. They find out that they're going to attack the convention, and so in an epic confrontation at the convention with grand displays of magic, like Delia turns against her fellow True Light members. Sam, James, Denver, Delia are all together, and they do a group spell that kind of traps the True Light members or something. Maybe some of them still escape, but like basically they get captured. And then plot twist, like Delia was actually just planning this on her own. She planned to take them down from the inside all along. Like the whole point was like for her to convince everyone that she was against her friends who were trying to help her, and so she had to make it believable so she couldn't tell them. Like that would have been so much better than what actually happened. So James ends up getting hurt in the same way, and then instead of just Sam saving James, it would have been Sam and Delia and like the three of them holding hands in the hospital, and like James end up living. Like that would have been so good, because then it would have showed their dynamic and the strength of the relationship, even though like their group was falling apart. I get that what the book was trying to do was try to show like, oh, friendships fall apart and sometimes there's nothing you can really do about it, because that's such a part of life. Friends come and go. But like, because the book ends with a happy ending anyway, it should have been the three of them happy and together. And then like the epilogue of the book should have been them graduating and like Sam and Denver are together, but then there's like maybe a teaser that True Light is still out there doing really sketchy stuff, and like there's a possibility for a sequel. Maybe True Light is like targeting specifically Delia for betraying them. Like that would have been so much more interesting than the ending that we did get. So those were all of my thoughts on The Fascinators by Andrew Eliopoulos. I hope that you enjoyed this review. If you read this book, then I would love to know what your thoughts are in the comments below. If you like this video, then go ahead and give it a like, and if you want to see more of my stuff, then make sure you hit subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified when I upload, because I upload twice a week on Mondays and Fridays, and you don't want to miss out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!